What's good, everybody? Sam Boy here, and today I wanted to talk to you all about California Governor Gavin Newsom and the recall effort to replace him. So whether you're a Cali resident such as myself or just follow politics in general, you may already know that Gavin Newsom is the current governor of California. But even if you didn't, now you do, so don't try and play dumb later, okay? Gavin was elected governor in 2018, but began his political career in 2003 when he was elected the youngest mayor of San Francisco at age 36. He was then re-elected in 2007 as San Francisco mayor before being elected lieutenant governor in years 2010 and 2014. A successful businessman, Gavin had graduated from Santa Clara University before getting into the sale and distribution of wine via his Plump Jack wine store, which later expanded to wineries, restaurants, and hotels. This was done with key investment from a family friend, Gordon Getty, and Getty is a very important name in the Newsom family history and the city of Los Angeles in general. Gavin learned the wine trade from his father, William Newsom, who himself learned the trade from a former German SS intelligence officer, Otto von Bolschwing. William had security clearance due to prior contract work for the U.S. government, and for some reason, he was chosen to help smuggle this former Nazi through Europe into the United States and then to Argentina, where he established his business. By the way, this was part of a larger effort by the U.S. government known as Operation Paperclip, when the U.S. smuggled former Nazi officers and scientists out of Europe following World War II and recruited them in hopes of bolstering their own intelligence gathering efforts as well as research and development. But make no mistake, former Nazis were integrated into societies around the world, including Western Germany, Soviet Russia, Argentina, Brazil, and Chile, to name just a few. Anyway, William also became an advisor for the Getty Family Trust, estimated to be worth over $10 billion. And yes, it's that Getty family, the one with the extravagant museum and campus in the Los Angeles Palisades. And he was also appointed a judge on the State Court of Appeals by none other than former California Governor Jerry Brown, and he decided on very significant cases during his tenure up to 1995. Frankly, William Newsom deserves his own video and a movie because his life was a pretty significant one on many fronts. But this is about his son Gavin, so let's get back to him. Being that Newsom was elected governor in 2018 and is a loyal Democrat, he endured plenty of challenges from right-wing political and media figures as well as right-wing citizens and cultural icons, since it followed the wake of Donald Trump's polarizing term as president from 2016 to 2020. Sometimes this was general agitation at liberals and Democrats, but other times it was specific to California and Newsom himself. Trump often referenced California when discussing issues like immigration and homelessness or PC culture at large, and he even once denied aid to California after the state suffered record-breaking wildfires because he and Gavin had traded spicy words with one another, though Trump later changed his mind after mounting pressure. Anyway, as a governor, Newsom was elected with strong support, and from my perspective, he's been as consistent and effective as you can expect a company man who benefits from the status quo to be as a head of state. Other Californians must seem to agree with me because he enjoys a relatively high favorability rating despite the major disruption to daily life that was, still is, the COVID-19 pandemic. At the onset of COVID lockdowns in 2020, California, and especially Los Angeles, got a lot of extra scrutiny because it's long been a world of stark contrast. One of the richest economies in the world, luxurious and diverse, but also some of the greatest number of homeless residents, economic inequality, and social despair. From Hollywood to Inglewood to Skid Row, take your pick. Whatever you're looking for, you can definitely find it here. I should also mention that Gavin has had to deal with mounting pressure not just from the right or the center, but also progressives and Bernie Sanders-style Democrats who have been demanding more left-wing measures before COVID was even a thing. Gavin was catching heat from all sides as the failures of our economic, social, and political institutions were being exposed in ways many citizens were ignorant of or simply ignored because they had the privilege of doing so or they were beneficiaries of it. And Gavin needed to offset the damage with the powers he was granted as the governor, which he did. For those who need their memory refreshed, the COVID-19 virus first became an issue in November or December of 2019, when researchers and journalists in China raised alarm about a new virus, its symptoms, and how fast it was spreading throughout the country. In fact, the doctor who first warned of the virus by name, Dr. Li Wenliang, died of complications from COVID-19 in February 2020. Despite warnings from Chinese doctors, the U.S. Center for Disease Control, and his own intelligence briefings, President Trump didn't heed the warnings, later claiming with journalist Bob Woodward that he played down the impact of COVID-19 because he didn't want anyone to panic.
That's a very tricky one. That's a very delicate one. It's also more deadly than your strenuous flus.
The admission calls into question the decision to not implement a mask mandate. The interview also shows that the president held back information that critics argue could have saved lives.
I wanted to always play it down. I still like playing it down.
Yes, sir.
Because I don't want to create a panic.
By the way, this was also a year after he had disbanded, or at least helped, quote-unquote, facilitate the restructuring of the U.S. pandemic response team in 2018, which was created by President Obama following criticism of his administration's response to an Ebola outbreak from 2014 to 2015. Lockdowns, travel bans, and a state of emergency followed by March of 2020, but were sporadic and came months too late, setting a negative tone for the U.S.'s response to the virus, which has been one of the worst throughout the entirety of this whole pandemic, and has persisted despite the best efforts of other leaders in the country and around the world. Compared to other U.S. state governors, Gavin Newsom was quicker to respond. In early March 2020, a California man from San Francisco died after returning from a cruise through Mexico, and the cause was determined to be COVID-19. As a result, a state of emergency was declared by Governor Newsom, the first governor in the United States to do so, by the way, and in the year and a half since, he and the state Congress have set an optimistic tone for California's own recovery from the pandemic. This has included prioritizing resources to healthcare workers and other essential workers, such as hotels, transportation, and overtime pay, expanding social programs for food assistance and job training, as well as the moratoriums on evictions and the generous unemployment benefits. Now, Bernie Sanders should get a lot of credit on this last part because it was his influence that would pressure the U.S. Congress to provide an additional $600 per week in unemployment benefits, which for many people ended up being more than they could make at their job normally. Not to be outdone by the progressive congressman, Gavin got an additional $600 a week included to Californians' unemployment benefits, which was in addition to the stimulus checks that Trump and Congress would pass throughout 2020, providing up to $1,800 for individuals and more if you had kids. And as of July 2021, Newsom hasn't slowed down on his response, as despite President Biden signing off on $1,400 stimulus checks following his election in 2020, though less than the $2,000 promised after the special election in Georgia of that same year, Newsom provided Californians with an additional $600 Golden State stimulus if you simply filed your 2020 taxes. And recently, he got authorization for his California Comeback Plan, which in addition to all these other provisions will include, you guessed it, yet another $600 to individual Californians, and more if you have kids, because California's economy is jumping with a surplus of over $75 billion. This is a part that I really want to emphasize because there were predictions all around the country amongst wealthy established insiders, cynical media figures, and entertainers that there was a mass exodus in California of the job creators, the industrialists, and the other important people the state needed in order to survive. And they sought refuge in other states like Texas, claiming California and LA specifically may never recover. But let it be known, California has been experiencing a mass exodus, though it has preceded the COVID-19 pandemic by decades, and is comprised mostly of lower and middle working class residents who have been effectively priced out of most cities in the state. And it's reflected in the current housing crisis where residents who have enough cash to buy a home are being outbid by multinational corporations like BlackRock. But they're poor, so what do they really bring to the table, am I right? Fuck them. They should have thought about that before they decided to be poor. Now, California is still struggling with COVID-19 as most places around the world are, but it has seen one of the best recoveries in the United States, and as I stated earlier, the economy is sitting heavily in the black, which has encouraged Governor Newsom to provide more relief to residents, including paying 100% back rent owed by tenants and over $2 billion for their utilities, more funding for homelessness and mental health services, more relief for business owners to get back up to their pre-COVID production levels, or to outfit their facilities to deal with the ongoing pandemic, and many other provisions through his California Comeback Plan. Now, Despite Gavin's success and his consistent popularity amongst voters, he still faced recalls on his tenure, and no less than 6 attempts have been made to recall him since 2018 when he was first elected, the most relevant of these being the 5th one, which started in late February 2020 by Orrin Heatley, a Republican and retired Yolo County Sheriff Sergeant, who had tried to recall Gavin in an effort that was suspended just weeks before this one had begun. The grievances Heatley claimed against Newsom weren't even related to the COVID-19 pandemic or Newsom's response, but instead reflect the general disagreements that conservative Republicans have with liberal Democrats. Heatley complained of high taxes, illegal immigration, reinstating the death penalty, and homelessness. And initially, this recall effort had trouble getting any traction. But Gavin couldn't let his stride go unbroken and was seen hosting an intimate dinner with his closest friends, family, and lobbyists at a fancy restaurant while telling California residents to socially distance and always wear a face mask. There was also controversy around the slow rollout of unemployment and other benefits to desperate citizens, and these PR disasters gave more credibility to the recall effort, and this time not just on the basis of political affiliation or grievances, but against hypocrisy and ineffectiveness from our elected leaders. As a result, the recall effort gained traction and became only the second successful recall campaign against a California governor in the state's history. At least 60 opponents have answered the call of replacing Gavin Newsom as governor of California, and as to be expected, it's mostly included Republicans, Libertarians, and right-wing independents. Now, to be honest with you, most of the names are frankly unimportant and uninteresting, with exception to one: Caitlyn Jenner. This is due to how polarizing a figure she had become in the wake of her transition to a transgender woman, and her open support for Trump and MAGA-style conservatism, giving the impression that a perfect storm was emerging around Gavin and threatened his first term as California governor. But last I checked, Gavin's approval sits comfortably well, over 54% of total voters supporting him, and 64% approving of his handling of the COVID-19 crisis. Not to mention all those bills and programs he initiated that I mentioned earlier. They successfully kept the economy at a surplus, and as a result, less Californians are worried about the budget and have an optimistic outlook on the future of the economy as well as life in general. California also has one of the highest rates of COVID vaccinations, so despite experiencing an uptick in COVID cases due to the Delta variant and the Lambda, which is soon to come, we're experiencing lower rates of hospitalizations and deaths because vaccines work, as well as masks and socially distancing. Meanwhile, Caitlyn Jenner is out here flip-flopping on critical trans issues of the day and disparaging the homeless because they're making life hard on private jet owners such as herself, only to then suspend her campaign to go film in Australia for the TV show Big Brother, or as she puts it, document history, which could be sold later as a documentary or reality show or some other type of media content package. And really, it's been for nothing. It's all been for naught, because only 13% of Republicans say they would even vote for her. Despite her blatant attempts to prove her conservative credentials, she hasn't really gotten the kind of support that you would expect from somebody of her notoriety, and especially for being so supportive of Trump and, MAGA-style conservatism, which is the flavor of the day, in that space. Basically what happened is that Caitlyn sold out one community to garner support from another and was utterly repelled from both. On one end, it does go to show just how rigid the conservative ideology remains in some respects, but also how not just anybody can, come up in that space spouting these ideas and these values, but that also identity itself isn't a guarantee that someone will have the same values, perspective, or political orientation that is commonly associated with people of that group, because identity isn't a moral code or a philosophy or even a singular experience. It's all a spectrum, right? The recall election is scheduled for September 14th, and I plan on voting to keep Gavin Newsom as governor for the remainder of his term. Most other California residents and voters largely seem to agree with me and have expressed approval of Gavin's term as governor, especially his COVID pandemic response. But one concern expressed by some observers is the low interest of Democratic voters because he creates a false sense of security, like there's no way he could lose the election, stoking fears of a repeat of 2016, in addition to a high number of undecided independent voters. Overall, I'm not as worried about this because, unlike, say, the humiliation of Hillary Clinton and the DNC in 2016, people across the spectrum are more polarized and willing to engage in any and all behaviors they believe will affect any kind of real change in their communities. And it just so happens that when it comes to the state of California, Dems have routinely beat Republicans by margins of 2 or even 3-1, even on a bad day. Nothing's guaranteed, nothing's 100%, but it's a very consistent pattern. Also, unlike, say, the states of Florida and Texas, or even the Supreme Court of the United States, there's less effort to stop citizens from exercising their basic right to vote. Though it's no secret that establishment Democrats really don't like progressives and Bernie Sanders-style Democrats, so they routinely try to, fuck them up, but that's a whole nother video. In the end, though, I just look forward to celebrating yet another brutal humiliation of right-wing conservatism in the Golden State, because it's the least they deserve, to be quite honest with you. But also figuring out how I want to spend my next additional $600 from Big Daddy Newsom. But that's it. That's Samboy, thoughts on Gavin Newsom and the recall effort of 2020. And I will talk to y'all later. Make sure to like, subscribe, and to share this video, this content, this audio with anybody else who you think would appreciate it. Thank you, and bye-bye.